send in Zonetta the Teams link real quick, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Give me just a second, and I'll. You guys can start, and I'll do that.
Okay, great.
You didn't cancel your meeting, so that's what.
I know. Trust me, it's an ongoing. I don't want to bore you with my ongoing Microsoft troubles. It treated me as a guest, and it wouldn't let me cancel the other meeting.
You're supposed to be nice to your guests. Tell Microsoft they're supposed to be nice to their guests.
Yes. Well, the other one did not have a link in it, so I was hoping people would see this note instead. So I tried to this morning when I tried to send out the agenda and the other thing, it wouldn't let me modify. It was treating it like an email, it was a mess. So anyway, that's my ongoing saga. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Again, my apologies for this not being cleaner. I'm going to have some serious personnel changes in my IT department here. That would be me, by the way. So I wanted to start out real quick with some project status, which I think is always good to kind of get us grounded where things are at. And Cello, would you just give us a quick summary of the work groups that we've established for this year?
Yes, we have six teams. I tell you what, I can start sending the emails to all other participants, and I can come back later if you don't mind.
Let me do that. Please do that.
I'll send it to Jackie, Gerald, and who else?
I got a note from Jackie, and she said she can come tomorrow. She had a meeting that came in today.
Do you want me to send? I can answer this question, but do you want me to send email to anybody else, or are we cool?
Joseph, I think, was tomorrow, but if you want to just hit everybody again, just real quick, just in case, that would be great.
Okay.
And so, Fidan, you're on the call today. Thank you. Would you give us a status of the utility partner where we're at in terms of the numbers so far for this year?
Hi, everyone. Yes. Sorry if I'm not appearing on camera. I am sick. 1 second. Let me just open up. We have, and Cello, correct me if this is wrong, but we have about $215,000, and that makes it 10 utilities. We're still working with getting more utilities on board, and a number of them have said that they will be officially signing the form and sending it over to us, but that's a work in progress for the time being.
And I can get back on that first question I just emailed to everybody. We have several initiatives going on. We have on the business process improvement, we have 3 initiatives. We have asset management, we have CIP, capital improvement program planning and delivery, and we have team energy, which is a new one. That is being headed up by Great Lakes, Eric Griffin. We have the team people, which is workforce and organization, headed up by Lisa Thompson. And we have a new, we have a team on challenge management. That's the utility lead is Ramona Harry from City of Baltimore. And we have a new, another new team, which is data analytics and technology, which has received a strong interest. Looking at, and the leads there are Yvonne Carney from Washington Suburban, Ting Lu, Clean Water Services, and I'm sorry?
Mike Sweeney.
And Mike Sweeney, yeah. So we have mixed up. So we have several initiatives going on, and all of them have started. Had an all hands meeting last Friday. So we're cooking with the gas.
Great stuff. Thank you, Chell. That's a lot of teams going. We do need to get more utilities signed up, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today, at least as this draft strategic plan is laid out. So the rest of the agenda, I'd like to spend a good share of our time together today kind of going over the draft strategic plan and where we're at on that, and try to get a little input if we can. We then also have, Shell wants to talk a little bit about the potential of seeking grants to help the WISE program, which I believe he's talked to a few folks about already to get some ideas on that. And then Fidan's going to talk about the proposal for an ambassador program for consultants for basically non-utility partners. And then we'll wrap up just seeing if it's possible for us to schedule a meeting at WEFTEC. I know a lot of people aren't attending, but maybe there's something we can do with a conference call as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And if you want to, let's see here. There it is. All right, can you see?
Oh, yeah.
Good, okay. Oh, Teams, get out of here.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Mark. Mark is frozen, it seems. Yeah, it seems like, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mark is frozen on the video, and my guess is that something on his wireless, on his network may be an issue.
You know all about that, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. This and it there it he's gonna maybe rejoin. But it always happens at the precise moment when you need the network the most, that's when it goes out. Okay, Mark's in.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Microsoft heard me talking bad about them and
Yeah.
decided to boot me out.
Okay.
Here we go, one more time. All right, so thank you to the small group that's been working with me, and I did get a few comments back on this presentation, but I thought it'd be worth at least taking a couple minutes to step through this. So what we've got today is the input that we got from the strategy working group, the subset of this committee that's been working on it. We're able to meet once, and I've been sending out some updates in the meantime, and this is just a really, you are really busy folks, and it's just really hard to find a time. And also let me apologize for the ginormous doodles. I'll try to avoid that in the future. It was just really hard to find some time. So we're going to go over the input that we got from that group, the proposed strategic objectives, a sample analysis for strategy 2, which is bringing in new utility partners, just to give you an idea of what we're thinking about to try to bring this, how we can do some analysis, and then finally close with a draft action plan for a strategy implementation. So we talked about important things to accomplish. We want to create a sustainable program. That's been at the heart of this, really what we're hoping to do. But actually, maybe let me rephrase that. The heart of this is really providing value to utility partners. And so we can improve understanding of the business and our individual utilities, improve maturity of organizations, and our methodology has been the water sector value model and a curated database, our process and people assessment tools, peer-to-peer collaboration, change management, continuous improvement model, and then of course connection. We have a nice technology connection to the Intelligent Water Research Project that Chella mentioned. So things we're trying to accomplish, what would attract people to the project is our terminology. This is some of the feedback we got is from the working group. Is our terminology getting in the way? Phrases like curated database. Do we need additional ideas on how to communicate the value? And we need to translate this information to attract new utilities. And I've had this, I've given 2 presentations now on WISE. I did one at the Michigan Water Environment Association Conference, and I just did one last week at the Pacific Northwest Clean Water Association Conference. And so I've been thinking a lot about that, and I've been trying to do a better job of trying to communicate this value. And by the way, I did use the video that we have up on the website, which was really good. We also need a mechanism to bring new utilities in the project. How do we do that? And then how do we get others in our utilities involved? So how does it relate to effective utility management, to other initiatives that are for utility managers? And then why should people choose WISE? We need to illustrate how it complements those other activities. And then we need some good examples of what others have accomplished. And it can be overwhelming. And I think that's a lot of times what people see this, and they see how far we've gone into it. And it does seem a little bit daunting if you're a new utility just thinking about getting started in the WISE program. So we got the working group input, which was to keep it simple. We really need a solidified communication strategy with some of the input we got. We need to develop the maturity model, which we're working on. And then how do we, one of the questions was, can we market this to private utilities? Can we bring them in? What about smaller utilities and technical colleges? And is there a way we can kind of work this in to make this part of the thinking of when we're not only thinking about wastewater process, but we start talking about business processes, right? As part of what we do as an industry. We've talked a lot about pitching this to empowering young professionals. I think this is a great idea for them to learn about how their utility runs. Bundling up case studies that are sent to interested parties after an initial meeting. I like to use the Grand Rapids one because it's a nice clean one that everybody can see and one that I think folks can relate to in their organization. And an internal pitch inside of our own utilities. This I think Zonetta is the one who's mentioned this, that helps us to prepare to be a utility of the future. So, and what we're really doing is moving utilities forward, and WISE helps the utility get better. And that's sort of my closing line I've been using for quite a while in my presentations. We also did a SWOT analysis. The definition I have of SWOT, which obviously it's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, is that strengths and weaknesses are those things that are primarily internal. And so we talked about those. Under strengths, we've got that we now have a very competent administrator of the program in WEF and an ally in WEF. We have some really capable people involved, and that's no understatement, and that's quite a strength. We've got very valuable content. It's absolutely utility driven. It's focused on mission and a true dedication to the program. Tying the work to the WEF mission. That's part of what we've been able to do, and it's pretty clear that it does. And we've got some great topic areas. I mean, these are very timely areas. Data analytics, our new one, that's a very timely area that we've added. Some weaknesses. Staffing for work groups, and this is really project team staffing. It really does put quite a burden on them because we have a lot of groups, and if Cello were to share his calendar, I think you get an idea of just how many meetings there are. So that's definitely a bit of a challenge for us. Let's see, we have people that have been really great promoters and folks who've worked on WISE, but they keep getting promoted. And so we've lost some folks due to that. So, and that's at our utility partners. We're engaging, we need a weakness, we need engaging more people in individual utilities. That's really true. We've been trying to do that. I know a number of our utility partners have been trying to do that. And it's not always easy to communicate the content. That's kind of back to this, it isn't a simple subject. It's an important one, but it isn't simple. Do you have a good, right now we didn't have a good way to get consultants engaged, and we're going to talk more about that later today in the ambassador proposal. And then we need a strategy for closing a topic. So in other words, we've been working on CIP and some others for quite a while. And is there a way that, can we kind of close those topics and then move on to something else? And then on the opportunities and threats, again, these are primarily externally focused. We saw opportunities, obviously, to add additional utility partners, and then the possibility of working with other water sector organizations such as AWWA, AMWA, NACWA, Public Works Association, ASCE, those sorts of things. We've done, and obviously, and we should also include Water Research Foundation in there as well. So we don't necessarily want to lose our connection, even though they no longer, we're no longer under Water Research Foundation. We don't want to lose that connection. Some threats, a threat for us could be if we don't have enough utility partners to have a critical mass. And part of that is the funding, and part of it, frankly, is just having enough people to work on things. Although I think it seems like we do have a pretty good mass of folks to work on things, but obviously funding is still important, kind of the basic fuel to keep this going. Utilities are stretched for money, and we need to be cognizant of what the cost implications are for utility partners. I would hope that we've kept the fees pretty low in comparison to a lot of things. I would hope that that's not a barrier for folks, but certainly, WEF and the project team are very willing to work with people who really want to be part of this, if that happens to be something that's keeping them from becoming part of it for a utility partner. And then also trademarks and copyrights. Those are the kinds of things that we have to, intellectual property, things we have to be careful of on that. So taking all that information in, I worked with the project team, and I sent these back to the strategy working group. And these are our proposed strategic objectives. Now, these are what the strategy hopes to achieve. And these aren't necessarily the strategies to achieve them. So in our objectives, we've got strengthen the WISE program, pretty obvious one. Ensure continued value creation for our utility partners, because obviously that's at the heart of what we're trying to do, is that this creates value for folks and it makes their time and their resources worthwhile. And then create and communicate a clear roadmap for WISE for the future. So in other words, we want this not just to be something that's wrapped up in a year or two. This is intended to continue to grow and mature. I'm going to pause there because I'm talking a lot. So if folks want to either raise a hand or put something in the comment box with what you think about these proposed strategic objectives. And my screen right now has got, I can't see it. So Scott, would you manage the hand raising for me, please?
Sure.
No hand.
Nobody so far. Yeah.
Okay. Anything in the chat box?
Not yet.
So
Right.
just, Mark, I'd say the only one, that strengthen the WISE program. I think when you get down into the details, it probably is pretty good. That to me is the one that's a little bit weaker. So
Okay.
I don't quite know what strengthen means.
Okay.
Is that in terms of resiliency? Is that in terms of, kind of risk exposure? So just and I don't think it's anything that merits a change right now, but perhaps as you go through and we talk about some of the details, is maybe come back to revisit the words and just see that if it does clearly reflect what we're trying to achieve with that. The other two I think are spot on, and really, really important. And I think I know what the first one's about, but
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yeah. What does that word mean? And yeah, so let's go through it. And then we are, believe me, this is draft. And if this doesn't feel good, this doesn't feel like, yeah, I want to get behind this, then we definitely want to improve it. So let me go to the next one. Thank you for that comment. So under strengthen the program.
Mark,
yeah.
got a hand up right now. If you,
Andrew raised his hand.
Oh, thank you.
No, I apologise because I'm watching your slides and I'm also looking through your kind of the internet for picking up the kind of mission statements and what I can. So this is an innocent question. I guess what I've not been able to pick up is I guess what the alignment of the program to the pressing issues of the water utilities. So what is really straining the utility market at the moment that really can only be resolved via the utilities working together to create the critical mass to deliver the research they need to thrive as organisations. It's kind of, it might be out there, but I was hoping Cello would send me the working groups as an indication of how those working groups align to those sorts of principles. Because I think if I was the chief executive of a water company, I'd be thinking, okay, so in terms of my strategic risk register, what are the things that are on this for my company that I need this network to gather the knowledge that I need to tackle those issues? Because I guess we're always facing, at the moment with climate change, we're tackling things that we've never tackled before. So the answers are out there. They're just not out there in the usual places. So my view would be is if you can define what the kind of almost that the most critical risks that the utilities have, then you can align your value proposition to those and know that you're going to hit absolutely kind of pay dirt every time you talk to them.
Just writing some notes here.
Mark's taking good notes, Andrew.
Okay.
Yes, I'm listening to you. I'm listening to it. I'm typing.
Yeah, I guess the experience we had is we set up a network of storm surge barrier operators across Europe, North America, and we constantly had the challenges that you guys have had, which is turnover of responses, and therefore you were constantly reliant on the commitment of individuals rather than the corporations. So we started to try and make sure that our objectives aligned to much more greatly aligned and embedded to the critical business issues that the organizations had. And that really kind of created the stability that we weren't having to make the case every time someone changed, because it was kind of slightly more embedded. That would be useful for me. So it'd be useful for me because we're not a utility, but there are lots of common risks that the asset operators in the water sector have that would create perhaps a partner offer that was wider than utilities if you were prepared to offer that.
It's a very good comment. And we have, in terms of the business processes, yeah, and I think you're hitting on something about how are we communicating the value that this approach provides to a utility, and how does it help them manage that strategic risk register? And I think your comment, to me, looking at this, speaks to a couple of different things. One is I think we do address. I wouldn't say we would just address all of them. I certainly wouldn't go that far, but I think we do. At least we do align. I'm certain with a lot of what CEOs are concerned about. But how are we communicating that and linking it to that? And then that would be the marketing piece. And then the other one is we're letting utility partners drive what things in this area of the value creation, what business processes we work on. Does that aligning with what is sort of right in front of us right now, the things that we have to face? We don't have anything on climate change in particular, for instance, but the data analytics one is definitely one I think is at least, I see nothing but data analytics, in a lot of the presentations, a lot of things that are going on. So I think the data analytics one, which was again driven by utility partners, is one that is hopefully will speak to, how are we using data, right? How are we gathering and using our data? So that's a really good point, and it would be really interesting to see what things we've done and how that aligns with what a risk register might look like for a water utility. Great comment. Other thoughts on those comments, or?
can I offer maybe some thoughts? I think it's a very good comment, Andrew, very important. And we've, at a previous time, we have defined a value proposition. Maybe I think it could probably be improved in terms of linking it to the critical business issues. But the components of that value proposition included, number one, that this is really a knowledge-based approach, that some of the improvements would come from the fact that we have a methodology that is based on learning. For example, when we talk about processes, the business processes, that component includes a method to really document in a very rigorous way what is it that we're actually doing, how we're doing things. And within the business process model, we need to define the metrics specific for that business process, but they would sort of be, as we develop different models for different business processes, they can kind of pull up to the KPIs on the organizational level. The second thing that I think is different about this program is that it includes aspects of systems thinking, and to look at interactions between different components, such as people, processes, technology, and change management. So therefore, it's more of a holistic approach, and that is linked to that improvement method. So when we looked at either processes or business or business processes or people or technology, we have the same improvement methodology that's foundational, where foundation is understanding what we do now, whether it's business process models, maturity models, and so forth. And, you know, goes on to the defining as is and to be and implementation. So there's a consistent improvement method. And the third is, I think, maybe a little softer, but I think a value that perhaps the current participants could attest to is the sharing and network, developing of a network people that share artifacts, methods, documents, experiences, and work together collaboratively on defining some things. So those are some of the components of the value proposition that we've made in the past. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
But I think it's very, very good comment to link it directly to the critical issues. Why are we doing this, and what kind of problems we're trying to fix?
So I guess that was the kind of link for me, is if a knowledge-based approach, process, documentation, KPIs, maturity models, and that kind of networks, mature networks enabled to harvest the information you need, aligns to other solutions to the critical drivers for the utilities, and it all kind of joins up. Yeah. But I think my organisation would say to me, yeah, we kind of do that, but where does it line to the things that really bother us, which to some extent are around ageing infrastructure and an absence of revenue funding, maintenance management, asset management. Systems thinking is important, but it's kind of lining those things up. I think I need to do a bit of work, Cello. So I'll do some research and I'll get up to speed with what you've already got in your bank.
Okay. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah, that's a good comment, and putting this all together in that way will be really helpful for us to articulate the value that WISE provides. Good comment. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next. Just walk through some of these other ones real quickly here. So under strengthen the program, we've got several strategies. The first one, not in any particular order, is to retain existing utility partners and our tactics. And this is just me putting words on paper, so feel free to improve. Tactics, we were getting young professionals involved, connecting to utility leadership as well as the subject matter experts. That's one of the things we've talked about. And as was mentioned, you know, how do we get our utility CEOs connected to this program, better connected to this program? We have some that are part of the program, but and whether or not, how do we better connect them? So again, getting other staff at the utility partners involved. That's getting them on some more of the work groups. I was able to do that with Clean Water Services. We've got 3 or 4 different folks working on different areas. And then continue building this peer-to-peer collaboration network, which is really one of the key components. And I think we talked a little bit about this as a team in terms of what kind of tools can we use in order to build, not just when they're working on WISE, but to build this interlinkage that is where it's not just the WISE program, but they can work on other issues and ask other questions. It doesn't just when they're participating in a WISE work group. Second strategy, bring in new utility partners. We've gone through some of these lower barriers to entry, talked about potential for consultant ambassadors. We're going to talk more about that later today. Marketing strategy, and then frankly, I would add to this now, and sales, right? There's marketing, which gets awareness out there, builds brand awareness, and then there's sales, right? How do we get to that individual, the right person or persons in those individual utilities who may be interested in joining, but we need to take that last step and really close the sale. We talked about empowering young professionals, having our marketing packages, messaging, and then how does WISE move utilities forward? A lot of this is just under marketing strategy, but I think we also need a sales strategy as part of this. Third strategy is to connect to other water sector initiatives. We have worked with Jim Horn, who is, what would you call him, the godfather of EUM, Jim Horn and EPA. So he was on our project review team at the Water Research Foundation. We need to make sure that we're staying connected to Jim and to others. And then as Zonetta pointed out, how we connect to utility of the future and how this program can help you become a utility of the future. How does this fit with AWWA benchmarking? Because those are all legitimate questions. How does WISE fit into that? So we need to make sure that we have answers to those questions. Illustrate how it complements other activities. And then if we can have program examples of what others have accomplished, I think that will also help in terms of bringing people in. Continue value creation, providing value to utility partners. I think we just talked about a really good area. How do we make sure that people understand how this works and in terms of improving the maturity of the organization? Building some new groups with SMEs on other business processes. We'll get that into works right now, as Chella noted. Continue building our people processes. We were off to a great start today. We had a meeting earlier. Then connection to the Intelligent Water Research Project, and I think Chella's mentioned that before. And then how do we complete and close existing processes so that we can kind of put that bow on that and then maybe move on to some other things. Or maybe we might decide that we want to keep some of those groups open because they're active and they're continuing to evolve. And then and the future roadmap for WISE, don't have a lot of stuff under this area that's still open to be developed. So if we looked at how would we analyze this? So if we're under goal 1, strengthen the WISE program, under strategy 2, bring in new utility partners, and we did an analysis, these are the kinds of things that we need to look at in order to implement this strategy. So for instance, what attracts people, utilities that are already signed up, they're joining a good team. How do we communicate, practical value to the utility? How do we communicate it? Why don't people join? There's unfamiliar new terminology as curated database we like to use as the example, and don't have the resources, or they're all very busy. That is absolutely a real barrier, or at a minimum, certainly a perceived barrier, and probably for a lot of people, it's a real barrier. And then is cash contribution becoming a barrier? So these are the kinds of things we like to do in terms of analyzing and making these strategies work. And then finally, action items. So how do we take and put all this into action? So this is just an initial draft to show you what something might look like, you know, the action item, the tasks, the goal, what we're trying to achieve with that particular action item, who, the when, who, and then by when. So that's, we can take, I'm borrowing a little bit of time from later, but I can take, maybe let's take 5 more minutes and for some reaction or thoughts on what's been presented. And so, Scott, would you mind managing the hands up again, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Todd, circling back to your question about strengthen, is that the right word, or is there another phrase, a way of describing what we're trying to do that makes sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, everything that was in there was about maintaining and growing utility engagement. So it's, I guess for me, something along those lines would be a more clear representation of, you want to strengthen it, but you've got a specific set of, everything is aligned with a pretty specific approach of how you're doing it. So.
You said growing and maintaining.
I said growing and sustaining utility engagement. Or maybe I'd switch those 2 words, sustaining and growing utility partner engagement.
Mark, I'm recording this, so we'll have a chance to go.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. So we can. All right. So anyone else have there? Thank you very much, Todd. Anyone else thoughts?
Hey, Mark, it's Ryan. I'll add something in there.
Please.
So I like this. I like your slide 14. I think that's kind of where we kind of fit in is resources. We're busy, the cash, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important to how do we show alignment within an organization so that in an organization, there's some priority that they have, there's some initiative that they have at the executive level that says this is important, right? And that therefore gets a lot of the utility active and engaged, because that's really what we need, is to have a certain high enough engagement within our workforce so that this participation, you know, we have the resources, the busy is taken care of, right? Because we're saying be busy on this, and that the amount of money is less than the value that's generated. You know, and I think that one of the things that probably, and you have it in here, but just like my perspective, is that those who have participated for four years, or a year here or 2 years, to really be able to show the value, what value has been generated from their participation, how can they really show that? And maybe it's tying it to some challenge or some operational efficiency, but then having the utility partners that have been engaged, maybe people on this call, really pitching why it's valuable to executives at utilities, right, at that level. So it's like maybe executive to executive pitch, and then allowing them to see how they can tie that into strategic implementation or something like that. So that's kind of how I think about it from my perspective of what kind of needs to happen internally for this to be successful, and then trying to think, how do you back out of that to make that a reality?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Good. Thank you. Any other hands up?
No.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to hold this comments open. We're going to meet tomorrow with the folks that couldn't make today. So I'll gather that input and I'll send out an update later this week to it. And I'll try to simplify it a little bit. I'll pull some of the early slides off and I'll just send out a simplified version of this to make it succinct. And I use the slide deck approach because I think hopefully it saves you a little bit of time when you're reviewing it, because I know everybody's very busy. So thank you all very much for that input. And Cello, could you do the update for the grant? Would 5 minutes be okay?
Yes, I'll try to do it. They've been telling me everybody for 4.5 years that I need to do elevator speeches. And it would have to be a really tall building for me to be able to do this.
All right.
This is the bottom line. I think that there is a lot of money is going to be invested in infrastructure. I think that what we have developed with assessment tools for the workforce and organizational culture, for business processes, and for technology from this other project, I think we have critical pieces to say these are tools for due diligence that you can show that when you make a proposal for the money that's going to be well spent, and the different levels of risks are going to be addressed. And I think that if a proposal was made by a number of utilities, 8 or 10 utilities and WEF, and that it would allow us to change the funding model where the grant could provide funds basically to WEF, and that the utilities would get not just the project team, but the utilities would get a part of this funding to essentially pay for all the hours that they have so far been providing in kind, so that you could get a project number for somebody to charge to. So I think that this would really help. It would allow us to invest into portals and websites and tune up the tools. It would really improve things. So I think that there could be a receptive ears out there for such a grant proposal. So that's the sort of the bottom line.
Great. Thoughts, comments, please?
Well, Mark, this is Scott. I think along those lines, a few of us are starting down a path to learn more about what the funding sources are, potentials are, as well as to think about the value proposition, to obtain the grants, and the associated benefits that we can express, and identify and follow some criteria that are used by the funding agencies to define who gets funded for what. So, I think there's some early discussions that we've had, a few of us, and that's something we're planning to pursue. And there have been a lot of steering committee members and others who like the idea, who think this has merit, and there's a lot of money out there, and that we ought to try to capture some of it.
So I think what we can commit to, Scott and I, is that we're going to come with a bit more detailed and concrete proposal and a framework for working with some of the utilities that have expressed interest in this, working with them and their networks to come back for the next, and have a detailed plan of how we would go about it. Right, Scott?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that it was really just an informational thing. Don't need to sort of belabor the point unless somebody has input and ideas right now on this call.
Hey, Cello, it's Ryan. I think it sounds similar to something that was started it's a similar model, maybe. If you think of federal funding, National Science Foundation hosts different workshops, and it brings people in from around the country.
Yes.
Which is kind of what we're doing, and so they had this big data regional innovation hubs and spokes workshop, which I'm going to send over right now, right? So this brings in together experts, which would be like the utilities, right? And maybe if there's a utility, academia, relationships, right? You bring those together. But there is an evolution of this into actual federal funding dollars, probably in the number of about 20 to maybe sometimes $40 million a year that come out of certain programs. So thinking of starting maybe somewhere like this, and if I can find the other links, I'll send them to you to kind of show the progression of how something goes from this idea where you're at today to something that becomes stand-up federally funded over time. But just an example.
Just
Great.
for those who are not familiar with Ryan's background, he used to work for the National Science
Foundation,
I'm sorry?
National Science Foundation.
National Science Foundation. So I have it in my notes from the last time we talked. I talked with Mark and Ryan to ping Ryan and mine his knowledge about this as well, because he used to be reviewing these proposals. So I think that would be definitely one of the doors that we would knock on, and that input is going to be very valuable, Ryan.
Great, thank you. So we'll definitely be making some phone calls and talking to others too, to see if we can tap some other knowledge and some other thoughts and ideas on approaches. So I'm going to do I'm going to move the last agenda item up. Are folks available for I think there's some folks on the call that are going to be at WEFTech. You may not necessarily be going to the workshop. Like Todd, you're going to be at WEFTech, right?
Yeah, I will get in there like late morning Sunday, so I should be able to join for about half the day.
Great, and then Zonetta?
Yes, sir, I'll be there.
Great. What is it possible, I think, at the end of the workshop to have a steering committee meeting?
Like I could do late in the day Sunday.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And maybe we could, if you're available, maybe we could all grab some dinner together. But you wouldn't have to do both. Great. Well, I'll try to put that together then. I'll work with Cello and with Scott. And so,
yeah, it might be safer to because some people may already have dinner plans. So if we can have a space between the workshop and dinner, it might be a little bit easier to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I thought. You know, we would do it before anybody goes to dinner. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Cello. So last 10 minutes, Fidan, if the proposal for the ambassador program, would you like to take us through that, please?
Sure thing. Yes, thank you. So we had a conversation with a number of steering committee members and also with the past PAC member, Aditya Ramamurthy, who is now with Kennedy Jenks. We talked about starting a WISE ambassadors piece to the WISE program, and that would basically have, it would be a way for consultants to be involved in WISE. What that would require is 30 to 40 hours of in-kind work commitment from them. They would have to sign an NDA. This way, we would make sure that consultants are working with the WISE program, with a team, the core team, and they would also be helping utility because they would also chip in funding, and they would be basically assigned to a utility to work with while they're working in the WISE program. And it will be a year-by-year basis. We spoke to Aditya. He went back to Kennedy Jenks, and he confirmed 2 weeks ago that he would be able to join as the first WISE ambassador. So we have to essentially decide if this is something that we want to pursue for WISE, if it's a good idea, and it could be a good way to involve consultants, or if we say, unfortunately, WISE ambassador program is not a go. And I see it, Zonetta has a question.
I guess I understand the theme behind it. Just to share real quick, our personal use of a consultant, even on the CIP delivery, I did not have staff, so I utilized somebody from Hazen to help me with it. But the thing about that I did was that we limited what they had access to, so they didn't have access to all the to the artifacts. So I guess when you're talking about the NDA, you know, one of the selling points for utilities is that this was a place where we could go and share information with and be comfortable with our documents that, because we paid for them, that we could share with each other to almost strategically use consultants in terms of things. So for someone who's used one in this project, we were very, very careful about how we use them, and we didn't allow them to have access to all of everything in the program. They just helped with that one specific project on our, you know, our case study for as a to be. So that's my thing about is if we're going to do it, how careful we're going to be about doing it, and then what are we going to allow them to have access to? Because I wouldn't be comfortable with just having all of my artifacts open to a consultant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think that there are two different ways to use consultants, I think. One is, for example, DC Water is now hiring, I think, Black & Veatch to help them out with some of the things, which is perfectly fine. They're taking training from Mike Barnett to do business process modeling. And so that is, so in that role, they're helping that one utility. And I think what Fidan is talking about is maybe a little bit broader, Fidan.
We, aside from just a few conversations about WISE ambassadors, we didn't really iron out what it would look like. So the points that you bring up, Zonetta, are definitely good, and it's definitely up for discussion. If we proceed with the WISE ambassador program, how do we want to structure it? Do we assign this consultant to one utility? If they come on board, how would they work together? What type of information will they have access to? So those are really up for discussion. I don't think, aside from the two conversations we had, we discussed the details.
Todd has his hand up.
Yeah, what are we trying to, do we know what we're trying to achieve with this? I mean, I think that's the first place to start is what's our goal? You know, is it because we want, by use of the word ambassador, I get the sense we see the consultants as a way to kind of spread the word to other utilities. But I think for me to understand what our constraints and our approach might be, a logical place to start is with defining what our objectives are by expanding this from what it has been. So I can perceive that there could be some value on it, but I think understanding what those objectives are so we could then tie any of the constraints in around those objectives would be the approach that I'd recommend.
Good. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Zonetta. Ryan.
Yeah, Fidan, it's got a similar overlap to what Todd's saying, and it's probably even more about the branding of it. Is it consultant focused only, right? Because when I think ambassadors, I think we're ambassadors too of the program. Are you wanting to include more than consultants in the program? And maybe we don't know yet, but if it's consultant only, maybe it's a consultant ambassador program. Or there's some way to distinguish that it's consultant only.
And to go back to the start of it, and I'm sure Cello has more details. Cello has really been trying to figure out how to get consultants involved. So this has been a conversation that we have had for many years. And now kicking off WISE with WEF, we just have come up with this idea. And again, it's an idea. We only had a few meetings about it. If this is something that the utilities are not okay with, we can scrap it, but this could be a way to get consultants involved working with utilities. And to your point, Todd, definitely, we need to iron it out some more and to figure out what it looks like, what the objectives are, what they will have access to, but I'm sure Cello can provide more details.
Well, my original thought, and I thought that it would be nice to have some consultants who get it involved. And the initial thought was that it would work like this. A consultant would bring a utility to the table and then help that utility with any if the utility has a constraint that they don't have enough in-house resources, they can get, a consultant to help them out as an extension of their staff. And they could, so if a consultant came in and said, I'm bringing, these 3 utilities and I'm going to help them with WISE homework, I don't see any problem. I think that would be great. And I also think that if utilities like DC Water hiring, I think it was maybe Black & Veatch, and Zoneta hiring Hazen and Sawyer, I think that's all great because it helps us get more stuff done. But it kind of was predicated on a consultant bringing some, bringing in new utilities to the table. So that's how, and that would address the constraint, the concern that Mark was bringing up about, expanding the number of utilities, and would do both, expand the number of utilities and get consultants engaged.
Todd,
Sorry.
Joe, let me add.
Zanetta and then Todd again. Or do you still have your hands raised?
Srini?
Well, I just remember the early days and the consistency of the UAIM days is that was a question that was asked probably near the first workshop at whatever WEFTEC that was, and that was seen at the time as being an objective to grow UAIM. That is, bring one or two utilities to the table and participate in that context, because that served a couple of purposes in achieving that objective. One is obviously growth for UAIM and now WISE. The other is that it does bring awareness, increases awareness, at least of the consultant community, if you will, and that maybe minimizes the risk of what consultants do with information like this, that some of which could be seen as leading edge, and take it on their own and differentiate it and compete in the space with utility information. And that's where we get worried. We worry about it in the UAIM days, and here it is now that we haven't bottomed out on it. So I just kind of add that in.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts or comments? I know we're right at time, or just a minute over. And we'll also take input tomorrow from the folks that couldn't be there today. I think Jackie's going to be there, and I think Joseph will be there, and then maybe one or two others. So, and then I'll summarize all this, and I'll get it back to you all before the end of the week. Great. Well, thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it. And thanks for putting up with Mark's interminable doodle polls. And we'll see you, if not sooner, hopefully we'll see you at 5 o'clock.